this whole idea of freedom of speech and this conversation is very important to me, and I'm glad to have you on to talk about it. So what started out as a neo-Nazi murder in Charlottesville and the president's failure to denounce Nazi and white supremacists exploded into a discussion in this country about the removal of Confederate statues. Have we gotten away from the point of what happened in Charlottesville, what it was really about?
And it seems to me we clearly have, and I think that was the point of the alt-right and the white supremacists seizing on an issue that they know that there's actually broad public consensus on not moving a lot of these statues. There's a Quinnipiac poll that came out today showing that 50 to 39 Americans aren't big on the idea of moving all these statues out. So they seized on an issue that they think is a winning issue for them and then tried to broaden out their appeal that way. And I think a lot of folks on the left fell for it. They want to have this discussion anyway, and so they saw the opportunity to have this discussion. But it seems like a misdirection from what actually happened in Charlottesville. The issue in Charlottesville is white supremacy, not whether some people think that statues should come down or stay up, because clearly 50% of the American population doesn't want to keep these statues up just because they're a bunch of white supremacist racists.
Did liberals get played by President Trump?
I think pretty clearly they definitely fell for what was, whether he plans it or not, a trap for the left. I mean, he said, you guys don't have a limiting principle. You're going to go after statues of George Washington or Christopher Columbus or Thomas Jefferson. And now you're seeing that actually happen on the left. The most obvious stupid case is this banning of this reporter from ESPN named Robert Lee, an Asian guy, from covering an event at University of Virginia. You know, the political correctness of the left is actually driving people into Trump's arms, even though Trump's initial response to Charlottesville and then his Tuesday response to Charlottesville was entirely wrong. I think that one thing that Trump has had, he's just benefited from the fact that the left is constantly reacting to everything he says with an enormous level of passion, and I think that that's actually a negative. Even what he did last night, insofar as going after the media, because the media reacted, instead of doing objective analysis of where he was not telling the truth, they jumped to, extraordinary critiques of his mental health and talking about how he was crazy and how he was morally bereft and all this stuff. All that does is it plays to his crowd. His crowd thinks that the media is out to get him. His crowd thinks that the media have a particular emotional animus for him personally. And so anything that the media do is going to exacerbate that.
Well, two things. And by the way, just because ESPN, I want to get it correct. ESPN has responded, and they were saying they didn't ban the guy's name is Robert Lee.
They moved him off of it.
They didn't ban him. They asked him if he wanted to, and he picked something that was closer to his family. They said that they didn't ban him, and they were looking out for his own interest.
They're trying to take away our culture. They're trying to take away our history. And our weak leaders, they do it overnight.
The media is simply responding to people who are there protesting and to the story of the statues being taken down. The media hasn't called for the statues to be taken down. So I don't understand when he says the media is trying to take away your culture. What is...
Well, I mean, I do think that one of the conservative critiques of the media, and this has been true for as long as I've been alive and probably before that, is that the media have an agenda, a political agenda, and they hide behind this patina of objectivity in order to press forward this political agenda. Don, you were very passionate about President Trump's statements about the media last night, and I think some of that was justified, but I think a lot of it actually goes to what his base thinks, which is they think that you have an animus particularly for President Trump, that you have an animus for his agenda on things like Confederate statues. I think you personally probably want to see these Confederate statues come down. I mean, is that true? I mean, I would assume you do.
Listen, I lived in the South for a long time, and to tell you the truth, I knew the statues were there. I was offended by the statues. Whether they should come down, I would leave it up to the individuals. But I do think that they are insulting to people, just as you would you want to see a statue of Hitler as a Jewish
No, I totally
person?
understand your point of view. The
would
point
you want
is
to go
that you have
to,
a point
which
of view,
I made
right?
earlier, would you want to go to, and listen, we shouldn't pretend that there's this fake objectivity. Everyone has a point of view. It doesn't mean that you're biased. And so, but just to get people to understand, as a Jewish person, you would not want to go to a Hitler high school. Well, that same effect, African Americans, that has the same effect. Robert E. Lee has the same effect on African Americans. And so, and also the Confederate flag. And so I think we have to be understanding of each other. It's not that I don't like the president or have an agenda against the president. I'm simply speaking the truth as I see it.
Okay, so and I totally understand that, but what he's saying and what his people are hearing is he's saying essentially that you do have an agenda in terms of what you think, promulgating what you think about Confederate statues. You have a clear point of view on that. That's a perfectly acceptable and I think understandable point of view, but the implication is that you are an objective reporter who's actually propagating a point of view, whatever that point of view may be. I mean, you just said openly that you don't think that your point of view is biased, but your point of view clearly is biased.
But
I mean,
what I said about the president last night coming out of his speech had nothing to do with statues. I was talking about his behavior on stage, so that had nothing to do with that. Yeah.
Again, totally understood. But the way that it read is that you have a personal animus toward the president, and that's the way he wants to play it. So whether that's true or not, that's the way that a lot of his followers are going to take it.
I only have a personal animus towards ignorance when people don't know their history, whether that's the President of the United States, a guest on this show, or someone I speak to on the street. I think if you're going to be able to, you need to be able to defend yourself. And in order to defend yourself, in order to have a right, clear perspective, you need to know history and you need to be educated about it. And in many ways, I think people who are fighting for these issues are not. And that means the people who want to take the statues down and some of them who do not want to take the statues down as well.
And then we get Whoopi Goldberg, the specter of Whoopi Goldberg, saying that we have to suck it up. You know, we sucked it up when Trump won. In what way did Democrats suck it up when Trump won? We got 4 long years of you whining that Trump wasn't the actual president of the United States, not my president, the Women's March, in the immediate aftermath of Trump winning. We got huge Black Lives Matter protests throughout the summer. The idea being that Trump was the font head of systemic American racism. We got the media and their collusion narrative that went on for years on end despite lack of evidence. We got an impeachment. At what point did Democrats actually come to terms with the fact that Trump had won? They never came to terms, which is why they're so celebratory now, because they think that now reality has snapped back into place. But spare me, really, all of this stuff is just, ugh. All these people who are unwilling to accept the results of election now going, you know, you guys, you got to grow up. I'm not willing to hear that from you. I'm sorry, Whoopi Goldberg. I think you have, I think you literally have no leg to stand on here. This is, well, not literally. I assume you have legs, but you have no leg to stand on here. Here's Whoopi Goldberg.
When you know who was elected 4 years ago, you know, Hillary Clinton didn't say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right, stop the count. She didn't say, this isn't right, I'm not going for it. She didn't say any of that. So all of you, suck it up. Suck it up like we sucked it up. And if you are not sure that you're comfortable with Joe Biden, do what we did. Find things and then take it to the law. And if the law says it's something to look at it. But from now on, suck it up.
Okay, that is literally what is happening right now. People are literally going to the courts. They're literally filing affidavits. Okay, so in the meantime, Attorney General William Barr, he has put out a memo to assistant U.S. attorneys all over the United States, telling them that if they see credible evidence of election fraud, then they should investigate it. This is being taken by the media as a sign that William Barr has militarized on behalf of the Trump campaign. Literally changed no legal standard. Okay, so the headlines are, William Barr initiates investigations, and the media are like, yeah, but we don't see any evidence of serious widespread voter fraud. That's not what the letter says. So here's what William Barr's letter actually says. He's the Attorney General. Here's what he actually says. And by the way, people are saying that this is him, you know, basically trying to please Donald Trump, that this whole thing is about him trying to appease Donald Trump because Donald Trump doesn't want to accept that he lost the election or something. What if the reason that William Barr is doing this, I mean, here's a possible take. What if the reason William Barr is doing this is because, number one, there may actually be credible allegations of voter fraud out there that are worth investigating, and two, if there are not, it is good for the DOJ to be on record saying that they were investigating those things so people feel more safe and secure after the election is over. Did it ever occur to anybody that the reason this process exists is so that when the election is over, people at least are able to point to the court cases and to the investigations and say they came up empty? Right? It turns out that the Mueller investigation, it was bad and it was badly predicated, but the Mueller investigation did justify Trump's claims that there was no collusion. Made it very difficult for Democrats to claim there was collusion. Well, after this election, let's say that the DOJ comes up with no serious allegations of widespread voter fraud. It's going to be a lot easier for people to point to that and say, okay, there was no widespread voter fraud that decided the election. The purpose of the process is not to come to a preset end. The purpose of the process is to ensure the integrity of the election.
Ms. Omar.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your testimonies. Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I could respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
That was not a question. That was
I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was
Members
not
of
a
this
question.
Committee can attack
On February
a witness
8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
that was not a question. Thank you for your participation. On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S.-trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I
yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Whether under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question. Because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
I don't think anybody disputes that. The question I had for you is that does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and include protecting people against genocide?
That is always the position of the United States.
Thank you. I yield back my time.